Close your eyes for a moment and imagine falling in love 500 years ago. No phones, no photos, no instant messages. Just the quiet rustle of parchment, the flicker of candlelight, and a heart that beats a little faster when your eyes meet across a crowded hall. Tonight, we're stepping back into a world where love was written in secret letters, spoken in glances, and sealed with wax instead of emotion. If you enjoy peaceful journeys through history that lets you drift, wonder, and dream, then you're in the right place. Before we begin, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap the bell so you won't miss our next calm dive into the past. And while you're here, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to know, would you survive love in a world without technology? Now, settle in, take a deep breath, and let's wander back in time to discover what dating and romance truly looked like. 500 years ago, the night is quiet. The stars above the old world shimmer faintly, scattered like bits of salt across a dark velvet sky. Somewhere, in a small stone courtyard, a single candle flickers on a wooden table. The air smells of earth, wine, and something sweet. Maybe roses, or maybe it's just the memory of them. 500 years ago, evenings like this were the stage for whispers, for stolen glances, for love that had to hide behind every polite word. There were no phones, no messages popping up with a heart emoji, and definitely no typing dots to drive someone crazy. Back then, romance was slower, painfully, beautifully slow. If you wanted to tell someone you liked them, you didn't just send a text. You had to wait days, sometimes weeks, just to slip a note into their hand. Every word cost effort. Every look meant something. The silence between people spoke louder than the noise of today ever could. Picture this, it's the 1500s. Somewhere in a quiet town, the sun has just set. The streets are narrow, cobbled, and lined with wooden houses that lean toward each other like gossiping neighbors. From one of the windows, you hear a faint melody, the sound of a lute. Someone's playing softly, probably trying to impress someone else. Inside the courtyard, a young woman sits near the candlelight, her dress brushed with gold embroidery. She's pretending to embroider a handkerchief, but her eyes keep wandering toward the gate. She's waiting not for her father, not for her maid, but for the sound of footsteps she's not supposed to hear. That's how love often began, not with a grand gesture, but with waiting. Now, imagine the man she's waiting for. He's nervous, probably sweaty under all those layers of linen and wool. He's pacing somewhere nearby, trying to gather the courage to approach. His friends have been teasing him for weeks. Just talk to her, they said. Easy for them to say. One wrong move, and he could end up shoveling horse dung for her father's stable as punishment. See, love 500 years ago wasn't simple. It was a dance between duty and desire, a game where every move had to be subtle. You couldn't just walk up and say, "Hey, I think you're cute." No, you had to speak in hints, metaphors, and long stares across the dinner table. Even the idea of love was different. People thought of it as something powerful, even dangerous, a force that could ruin reputations, start wars, or, if you were lucky, make life worth living. If you were noble, love wasn't really about feelings. It was about politics. Who you married could decide whether your family rose in power or fell into ruin. So most marriages were arranged. Two people could share a wedding bed without sharing a single spark. But that didn't stop people from falling in love anyway. Behind the grand halls and polite smiles, letters were being exchanged in secret. Lovers met under the cover of night or whispered during church, pretending to pray. Even the most careful households couldn't stop the heart from wandering where it wanted. For the poor, love was simpler, but not necessarily easier. Peasants worked from sunrise to sunset. Most didn't marry for power, but for survival. Still, even in the smallest villages, you could find stories of secret promises and midnight meetings by the well. A farmer's son giving a girl a ribbon he saved up for. A milkmaid blushing at the sound of her name in a song. No matter the class, love found a way to bloom in the cracks of everyday life. And in those rare moments when two people's hearts met, really met, the world felt suspended. Every breath, every glance, every flutter of a sleeve became part of the story. That's what made romance then so intense. It was fragile, and because it could be lost so easily, people cherished it even more. Picture again our young lady in the courtyard. The candles almost burned down. The moonlight spills across the stones like silver water. Finally, she hears footsteps. Her heart jumps. The wooden gate creaks open, and there he is, the nervous young man with the sweaty palms. He bows awkwardly. She smiles just enough to give him courage. They don't touch, they don't dare, but their eyes meet, and in that moment, it's enough. For a few minutes, they talk about nothing: the weather, the music, the latest gossip about someone's runaway horse. But underneath the small talk, there's a whole other conversation happening, one made of tone, glances, and pauses. He tells her she looks well tonight. She says thank you, though she knows it's far too forward to blush. They both laugh softly, nervously. It's the 1500s version of a first date. And just like that, a new story begins. What's funny is, even though the centuries have changed, the feeling hasn't. That tiny knot in your stomach when you like someone, the overthinking, the endless waiting for a sign, the fear of saying too much or not enough. They had it all too, just with fewer snacks and no Wi-Fi. Love 500 years ago was a quiet rebellion against the loud world of rules. It was patience, longing, and hope, all rolled into the flicker of a candle. As the night deepens, the lovers part ways. He disappears down the narrow street, glancing back once before the shadows swallow him. She stays behind, staring at the gate, her heart racing. The candle finally dies out, leaving only the moon to keep her company. Somewhere far away, another couple is doing the same dance, in another courtyard, another lifetime. And even though their words, clothes, and customs will fade into history, their feelings remain, because love, in the end, is stubborn. It crosses time, slips through rules, and whispers the same promise in every century: I see you. And under that whisper, that small, glowing truth, we begin our journey. So close your eyes. Imagine the candlelight, the soft echo of footsteps, the nervous laughter in the dark. 500 years ago, love was slower, sweeter, and often forbidden, but always real. And tonight, we'll follow it, one whisper at a time. 500 years ago, love didn't always get to choose. In a world ruled by titles, land, and legacy, marriage was more like a contract than a confession of the heart. Families didn't ask, do you love them? They asked, what do they own? And can they give us an alliance? It sounds cold, and honestly, it kind of was. But people found warmth in other ways. Imagine you're a young noble in the 1500s. You've just learned that your parents have arranged your marriage, not because you fell for someone, but because their father owns a castle with a better moat than yours. Romantic, right? Your job is to smile politely, nod, and prepare for a lifetime of duty. Love could come later, if it came at all. Still, behind all those formalities, hearts did their own quiet work. In the grand manners, noble marriages were chess games. Every move mattered. Who you married could raise your family's status or destroy it. Daughters were often treated like negotiation pieces, a sad truth wrapped in silk and ceremony. But don't imagine every bride as miserable. Some learned how to play the game. A clever noblewoman might use charm, kindness, or wit to win genuine affection from her husband, or at least a peaceful household. And sometimes, love grew out of friendship, or mutual respect, or the sheer amount of time two people spent tolerating each other over decades. Down in the villages, it was different. Peasants didn't have moats or dowries to worry about. They had crops, chores, and aching backs. Love wasn't arranged by letters and wax seals. It happened at the market, during church feasts, or while working side by side in the fields. Still, even simple love had rules. A father might not let his daughter marry a man who couldn't prove he could feed her. Courtship wasn't just about feelings, it was about survival. So while the nobles were marrying for politics, the poor were marrying for bread. Either way, love had to sneak in through the cracks. Of course, people being people, not everyone followed the rules. Some nobles fell hopelessly for people they weren't supposed to. A lady might fall for her knight. A merchant's son might get caught gazing too long at a noble's daughter. In those moments, the world became smaller just to people and the enormous risk between them. It wasn't just scandalous, it could be dangerous. In certain places, marrying beneath your station could ruin your family's name or even lead to punishment. Still, there were always a few who dared. And when they did, oh, the gossip. If TikTok had existed in the 1500s, half the village would have been whispering about Lady So-and-so sneaking away with her stable boy. The other half would have been pretending not to care while listening intently. But under all the drama, there was something quietly beautiful. A reminder that love doesn't care about bloodlines, or wealth, or which family crest you hang over your bed. Let's step into the shoes of one of those young brides. She's 17, standing in a grand hall, wrapped in layers of brocade and lace. The smell of beeswax candles and fresh herbs fills the air. Around her, important men are discussing the marriage contract like it's a business deal, which, honestly, it is. Her husband to-be stands across the room, awkward and stiff. They've spoken maybe twice. She lowers her eyes, because that's what she's been taught. Modesty, grace, obedience. But deep down, she's wondering the same thing anyone might. Will I ever love this person? Will he love me? Or will I spend the rest of my life pretending? It is a heavy thought for someone who is barely old enough to remember being a child. Still, on their wedding night, after all the rituals and blessings, sometimes something unexpected happens. A kind gesture, a shared laugh, a soft word, and just like that, a spark appears where no one thought it could. Because even in the most arranged of marriages, love sometimes found its way in, quietly, patiently. Now shift the scene. Far from the candlelit halls, a young farmer's daughter is at the village well. She's filling a bucket when a boy she's known since childhood walks by. He's carrying firewood, trying to look strong but nearly dropping half of it. He nods shyly. She looks away, pretending not to notice, though her smile gives her away. They don't have the luxury of poetry or fancy letters. Their courtship is built on moments, helping with the harvest, walking home after mass, sharing bread under a tree. In the evenings he might carve her a small wooden charm, a bird, a heart, something simple, and leave it where she find it. She might save the prettiest ribbon she owns to wear on Sundays, just so he'll notice. It's innocent, humble, and real. If you listen closely, you can almost hear their laughter over the rustling of leaves and the distant sound of the church bell. The difference between noble and peasant love wasn't just about class, it was about freedom. Peasants didn't have much, but they often had the right to choose. Nobles had everything except choice. So while the poor dreamed of comfort, the rich dreamed of love. And somewhere in the middle, everyone just wanted someone who'd look at them the way lovers do, with warmth, with understanding, with the quiet thrill of being seen. It's funny, isn't it? After 500 years, that hasn't really changed. We still want connection. We still want to be chosen, not for what we have, but for who we are. As the night deepens over that old world, the noblewoman and the farmer's daughter both drift asleep, different lives, same dreams. Somewhere, both whisper a small prayer to the same stars. Let love find me, and maybe, just maybe, the stars listened, because even in a world ruled by duty, love found its way through locked gates, through arranged vows, through endless expectations. It may not have always looked like passion or poetry, but it was there, glowing quietly in the corners of human hearts. In the end, love 500 years ago wasn't so different from love today. It still asked for patience. It still demanded courage, and it still made fools out of everyone, noble or not. So as we leave this chapter, imagine the echo of soft footsteps in a great hall, the laughter from a distant field, and the unspoken truth that has followed humanity since the dawn of time. Duty may write the story, but love always finds a way to edit it. Yes, love actually had rules. If you were a knight, and you wanted to show devotion to a lady, there was a whole list of things you were supposed to do. You'd ride into battle wearing her colors, maybe a ribbon or a glove tied to your armor. You'd dedicate your victories to her name. You'd write songs about her shining eyes, her grace, her well. You get the idea. And most importantly, you were never supposed to expect anything back. Courtly love was often about admiring from afar. The lady was usually married, highborn, and completely unattainable, which of course made it even more exciting. So the knight suffered in silence, wrote heartbreaking poetry, and sighed dramatically under the moonlight. Basically, the medieval version of someone posting sad quotes on their Instagram story. In castles and courts, music floated through the air like perfume. Troubadours, wandering poets and musicians, traveled from town to town, performing songs about love, so pure it could break your heart. These weren't love songs like we know today. No catchy choruses, no baby, baby, baby. They were long, flowery verses about loyalty, longing, and sometimes a touch of despair. One famous poet wrote, "My heart is her servant, my soul her prisoner." That might sound dramatic now, but in those days, that was how you proved devotion through elegant suffering. If a lady smiled at you, that was enough to keep your heart warm for a year. If she dropped her handkerchief, you'd probably write a 12-page poem about it. Since most courtly love was secret, or at least very discreet, lovers developed a language of symbols. A rose wasn't just a flower. It meant beauty and secrecy. A glove could mean loyalty. A ribbon tied to a wrist might say, "I'm yours," but no one can know. Even colors had meaning. Blue for faithfulness, red for passion, white for purity or pretending to have it. People used these tiny details to say things they couldn't say aloud. It's kind of like sending emojis but riskier. And if you were lucky enough to exchange letters, oh, those letters were treasures. Every curve of ink, every wax seal carried the weight of hope and fear. Letters were often written in poetic code, so even if someone intercepted them, they wouldn't know what they meant. A simple line about the moonlight on your window might actually mean, "I saw you last night, you looked beautiful." Courtly love wasn't just written, it was performed. Picture a grand banquet, chandeliers dripping with candlelight, velvet gowns, laughter echoing off stone walls. The king sits at the head of the table, half listening to a troubadour strumming his lute. Then, across the hall, a young knight glances at a noblewoman. She pretends not to notice, but her fan moves slightly, a silent reply. They never speak directly, but their gestures are a conversation, a bow, a smile, a pause before turning away. Every move means something. It's like watching two people flirt, using Morse code made of body language. And yes, sometimes, everyone around them knew exactly what was happening, but pretended not to. After all, what's a royal court without a little gossip to go with the wine? The language of courtly love didn't stay locked in castles. It spilled into literature, shaping stories that would last centuries. Think of Romeo and Juliet, star-crossed lovers speaking in poetry, willing to risk everything for one another. That whole idea came straight from the culture of courtly love. Writers like Dante, Petrarch, and Chaucer filled their pages with lovesick heroes and virtuous ladies. They described love as both agony and grace, a sickness and a salvation. People read those stories by candlelight inside, imagining themselves swept up in similar fates. Never mind that real life was full of mud, taxes, and noisy roosters in stories. Love was divine. Of course, not everyone bought into it. Some people thought the whole courtly love thing was ridiculous. Imagine being a servant at the castle, watching your lord write emotional poetry while you're trying to clean the floor. "Oh yes, sir, please keep crying about Lady Eleanor while I mop around your boots." Even some writers made fun of it. There were jokes about knights who couldn't focus on battle because they were too busy sighing about their crushes, or about ladies who collected admirers the way some people collect jewelry. Because, let's be honest, love can make everyone a little silly, no matter the century. What's most fascinating, though, is how emotional love was back then, even without touch. In many cases, lovers never held hands, never kissed, never even spoke privately. Their entire relationship might exist through glances, poems, and dreams, and yet, it felt real. There is something hauntingly beautiful about that. Two people falling deeply for an idea of each other. Maybe that's why courtly love stories still tug at our hearts today. They remind us that love doesn't always need to be physical to be powerful. Sometimes, just knowing that someone somewhere is thinking of you, that's enough. So picture the scene one more time. A knight kneels in a quiet chapel, whispering his devotion to a lady he can never have. A poet dips his quill in ink, trying to turn heartache into something beautiful. A noblewoman hides a letter in her sleeve, pressing it to her chest before anyone sees. All of them, in their own way, speaking the same ancient language, one made of patience, poetry, and longing. 500 years later, we still speak it. Maybe not with lutes and ribbons, but with text messages, playlists, and late-night confessions. The tools change, but the feeling never does. Because love, whether it's whispered under candlelight or sent with a little heart emoji, is still the world's oldest and most confusing language. So tonight, let's leave the poets to their sighing, the nights to their dreaming, and the candles to their flickering. Our next story awaits at the fairgrounds, where laughter, dancing, and first glances light up the night. If you lived 500 years ago, there were no apps, no blind dates, and no mutual friends to introduce you. If you wanted to meet someone, you waited for one thing, a festival. Because in a world of rules and reputation, a festival was freedom. Most of the year, life was predictable. Work, chores, church, repeat. But when a fair or feast day arrived, everything changed. Villages came alive. Bright flags fluttered between rooftops. Bells rang. People left their fields and shops to flood the town square. It was like the whole world decided, let's just be happy for a bit. There were jugglers, musicians, food stalls, animals, and laughter echoing down the streets. For one day, peasants could dance beside merchants. Nobles could stroll among commoners, and everyone pretended social classes didn't exist, at least until tomorrow. And of course, there was always one thing people secretly looked forward to more than the food or games: the chance to see someone special. At a medieval fair, your eyes did most of the flirting. Across the marketplace, someone might glance up while buying bread, lock eyes for a second too long, and then look away, pretending to study the apples instead. It was a dance of glances, quiet, delicate, and full of tension. If the feeling was mutual, maybe there'd be another glance, maybe a shy smile. And if you were lucky, maybe you'd both end up at the same dance that evening. Because festivals weren't just about food and laughter, they were about dancing. In the town square, musicians tuned their fiddles and lutes. The air buzzed with rhythm. Long lines of villagers joined hands, moving in circles under torchlight. It was the one place where men and women could touch without raising eyebrows. Just think about that. You could spend months seeing the same people every day, never allowed to speak privately, and suddenly, for one night, you got to hold someone's hand. No wonder the dances lasted so long. Imagine it. The sky is streaked with pink and gold from the setting sun. Torches burn low, crackling as fireflies blink in the dark. The musicians strike a tune, quick, cheerful, impossible to resist. The air smells of roasted meat and wildflowers. A young man, nervous but determined, spots the girl he's been watching all summer. She's laughing with her friends, her hair tied back with a simple ribbon. He hesitates. His friends nudge him forward. He clears his throat, straightens his tunic, and walks over. "Would you like to dance?" he asks, trying to sound casual, but mostly sounding terrified. She pretends to think about it, then smiles. Maybe just one. And just like that, the music takes over. Their hands meet rough palm against soft skin, and for a moment, the world disappears. The steps are simple: a turn, a clap, a bow. But their hearts are racing like galloping horses. When the song ends, they step apart, pretending it was nothing. But both know they'll remember that feeling for a long time. In cities and noble courts, festivals were even grander. There were masquerades where people hid behind glittering masks. Imagine that, finally being free to speak to anyone without titles or expectations. For one night, a servant could dance with a prince, a merchant could flirt with a lady, and nobody would know until the masks came off. The air at these parties shimmered with mystery. Every laugh carried a question. Every gesture said, "Who are you really?" It's as easy to see why people fell in love at masquerades, or at least thought they did. There's something thrilling about mystery. Maybe that's why modern dating apps still have profile pictures that look nothing like real life. Some things never change. And between the dancing and the guessing, there were games, tossing rings, fortune tellers, reading palms, contests of strength, little moments that gave people excuses to talk, tease, or share a secret smile. A young nobleman might lose a game on purpose just to hear a girl laugh. A girl might drop her glove so someone would pick it up. A tiny, perfect trick that's probably older than time itself. As night deepened, lanterns glowed like soft stars along the streets. Music turned slower, sweeter. The laughter quieted into murmurs. People drifted away in pairs, walking by the river or sitting under trees. The fair that had started in chaos softened into something almost magical. A couple might share a cup of spiced wine, hands brushing by accident. Someone might give a gift, a small flower, a charm, or a promise whispered into the dark. No one wrote it down, but for many, those moments became memories they carried forever. The festival would end. The lanterns would burn out. The next morning, life would go back to its usual rhythm. But love, once sparked, had a habit of lingering. Back then, there were no photographs, no selfies to prove that a special night happened. Just memories, flickers of laughter, a voice, a smell of smoke and perfume, a half-remembered smile. But maybe that made it more precious. When you can't replay something, you hold it closer. And that's what festivals gave people: moments. Fleeting, perfect, human moments that could turn into love stories whispered for years. Some of those loves faded with the season. Others lasted a lifetime. But all of them began the same way, with two people seeing each other for the first time and feeling that quiet, electric pull that no one could explain. So as you listen now, imagine yourself standing under the torchlight of an ancient fair. Music hums through the air, laughter dances around you, and somewhere in the crowd, a pair of eyes meet yours. No words, no plans, just that spark, small but undeniable. That's how love began back then. Not with swipes or screens, but with courage and a heartbeat. Because every great romance, even 500 years ago, started with the same simple miracle. Two people noticing each other and deciding to take the first step. And just like that, history changed. One dance, one glance, one shy smile at a time. Love, 500 years ago, wasn't easy. It was patient, quiet, and often very, very secret. Because in those days, the wrong kind of love could ruin you. A noblewoman caught writing to the wrong man. Scandal. A servant seen smiling too much at a lord. Fired. Even two people from rival families could be forced apart. So lovers got clever. They built an entire secret world made of letters, symbols, and silent promises. Let's start with the letters. Because if you couldn't say I love you out loud, you wrote it down. But not everyone could write. So the act itself already said something. If someone handed you a neatly folded parchment sealed with wax, your heart probably raced. And those letters weren't long essays. They were poetry, half confessions, and dreams tucked between the lines. Something like, I saw you at the chapel today. Your ribbon was blue. I prayed, not for my soul, but that you looked my way again. Simple, quiet, but heavy with meaning. Lovers learned to fold their notes into complicated patterns, triangles, hearts, or knots, so you'd know if someone opened it. A little medieval version of message seen at 3:02 p.m. If the letter made it to you unopened, it felt like magic. If it didn't, well, let's just say gossip spread faster than pigeons. But how did those letters get to the right person? Ah, the art of the secret messenger. Friends, maids, brothers, stable boys, even curious children, all became silent postmen of romance. You'd see a girl accidentally drop a small bundle near the well, and a moment later, someone else would pick it up as if nothing happened. A wink, a nod, a glance, that was the whole postal system. And sometimes, people used objects instead of paper. A handkerchief embroidered with a certain flower, a ribbon tied in a specific way, a coin left in a spot only two people knew about. Every gesture was a sentence. Every item carried a hidden paragraph. Before emojis, there were flowers. Back then, people truly believed blooms had meanings. A red rose meant love, of course. A white lily meant purity. A violet meant faithfulness. And if someone gave you a yellow carnation, that was basically the medieval version of its complicated. A lady might tuck a tiny sprig into her gown, pretending it was decoration, but her lover would know exactly what it meant. Sometimes the flowers were arranged into coded messages, one bloom for every word. It was like writing a love letter that could sit in plain sight, even on a banquet table, and only two people would know what it truly said. Imagine sitting at dinner beside your family, your heart racing because a single red petal across the table just told you, I'm thinking of you. For noblewomen, embroidery was more than a hobby, it was a language. They'd stitch initials or patterns that meant something only their lover understood. Maybe a hidden heart under the corner of a handkerchief, or a tiny symbol sewn into the lining of a sleeve. It looked like harmless decoration, but if you knew the code, it could say things like, I miss you, or our secret is safe. It's almost funny, isn't it? The very same sewing that society said kept women modest was also how they rebelled, quietly, beautifully. Then there were codes, not in writing, but in behavior. If a woman wore a certain color ribbon one day, it meant yes. If she didn't wear it, it meant no. If she wore a totally different one, that meant we're being watched. People used fans, gloves, and jewelry to speak whole conversations no one else could hear. In Spain, for example, women had an entire language of fans. If she held it near her heart, it meant affection. If she closed it slowly, it meant goodbye. And if she fanned herself fast, well, that meant she was mad at you. That's medieval texting. Right there, all without saying a single word. But secrecy came with risk. If you were caught, punishment could be brutal. Exile, confinement, even death for some. Still, people did it. Because love, even when forbidden, found a way to breathe. There are real letters from that time that survived. Worn, faded, but still full of heartbeat. One French soldier wrote to his wife during the 100 Years' War, "My heart is always with you, though my body is far. If I do not return, know that I have loved you until my very last breath." It is strange how something so fragile, ink on paper, could survive centuries when the people didn't tea. Once a letter was sent, there was only waiting. No read receipts, no instant replies. You'd wait for days, sometimes weeks, watching the road, praying the messenger didn't get stopped or lose it in the rain. When the reply finally arrived, you'd light a candle and read it slowly, over and over, as if the words themselves were a kind of warmth. Maybe that's why letters back then felt more real. Every sentence cost time, courage, and care. Every word was chosen, not just typed. Love was slower then, but maybe it was also deeper. Tonight, as you listen to this story, picture a quiet room lit by one small flame. Outside, rain taps against the window. Someone sits at a wooden desk, quill in hand, writing the words they can't say out loud. The ink glistens for a moment before it dries. They fold the paper carefully, press it to their lips, and whisper a wish before sealing it shut. Somewhere, miles away, another heart is waiting to read it. That's what love looked like 500 years ago. Not loud or instant, but patient, hidden in letters, carried by courage, and written in a language only two people could understand. Because when words were dangerous, silence itself became romantic. Wooing in the 1500s was nothing like swiping left or right on a phone. It was slow, deliberate, and often a little ridiculous, but in the most charming way. If you were a man and you wanted to win a woman's heart, it wasn't enough to say, "I like you." No. You had to perform. You had to impress. You had to survive the scrutiny of her entire family while still looking dashing. And women, they had to play the part of mystery, grace, and subtle teasing, sometimes all at once. Imagine a knight in shining armor, not just metal, but metaphorically, too. He's polished, primped, and prepared. His hair is combed, his tunic spotless. The horse is groomed. Every detail counts. He might ride through the streets, carrying a banner with her colors, just to show his devotion. Or perhaps perform some small feat of bravery, saving a cat from a tree, or fending off a particularly aggressive goose, all in the name of proving he's worthy. Sometimes the feats were slightly overdramatic. History docenti record how many knights accidentally tripped over their own swords while trying to impress someone. But let's just say it happened. Still, the principle was the same. Show, don't tell. A little flair, a little poetry, a lot of courage. Poetry was essential. Every gesture needed a song, a sonnet, or a delicate line written on paper. "Your eyes outshine the stars," or "Your hand is the treasure of my life," were pretty standard. Sometimes, men would send minstrels to sing outside a lady's window, strumming a lute with as much emotion as their lungs could manage. And ladies weren't passive in this game. They would respond with subtle gestures, a fan flick here, a smile there, a ribbon tied just so. It was a dance of social signals, a conversation made of symbols, glances, and poetic exaggeration. Courtship also involved gifts, and not the casual flowers or chocolate of today. Gifts had weight and meaning. A hand-embroidered handkerchief could signify affection. A locket or ring might carry a hidden message, engraved with initials or secret symbols. Even a single feather could be a token of admiration. The key was subtlety. Gifts weren't just exchanged, they were decoded. Giving the wrong gift could be disastrous. Giving a red rose instead of a violet might send the wrong message. People got very creative, and, sometimes, very confused. Wooing looked different depending on where you were. In Spain, knights might participate in tournaments, risking life and limb to earn a lady's favor. In Italy, merchants might compose intricate poems, full of clever wordplay and metaphor, to woo a potential bride. In France, noblemen might host lavish dinners, hoping a well-timed jest or a charming beau would win hearts. Even commoners had their rituals, a shy visit during market day, a shared loaf of bread, or a ribbon tied into hair as a signal. Every region had its style, but the goal was always the same, to be noticed and remembered. Not all of it was serious. In fact, some of the most memorable courtship stories are a little funny. There were knights who tripped over their own horses while trying to appear heroic. Merchants whose poems accidentally insulted their beloved because they misused a word. and ladies who pretended to faint just to see how devoted a suitor really was, a medieval version of testing the waters. All of this sounds absurd, and it was, but somehow it worked. People fell in love, despite, or maybe because of the awkward theatrical steps it took to get there. Wooing was also a subtle game of strategy. For a noblewoman, every glance, every smile, every response was measured. She had to maintain her reputation while still letting the right person know her interest. For men, timing was crucial. Approach too soon, and he seemed desperate. Wait too long, and someone else might swoop in. Every gesture was calculated. But behind the strategy, there was genuine emotion. People were brave in ways we rarely think about today, standing under a window, risking embarrassment, rejection, or scandal, all for the chance to be near the person they adored. Even with all the public ceremony and theatrics, some of the most important moments were private. A whispered conversation in a quiet hallway, a note slipped under a door, a hand touched briefly, just a fleeting brush, but enough to send the heart racing. These moments were treasured because they were real. No one else needed to see, no one else needed to approve. In many ways, those small, intimate gestures were more meaningful than the grand displays. They were the moments that lovers remembered for the rest of their lives. So, the art of wooing was equal parts performance, poetry, and patience. It was loud in the halls and quiet in the corners. It was serious, silly, romantic, and sometimes absurd. And maybe that's what makes it so magical. Because love, whether 500 years ago or today, has always demanded courage, creativity, and a willingness to be seen, a willingness to risk a little embarrassment for the chance at connection. So picture the knight, the merchant, the shy villager, each taking their careful steps. Imagine the ladies, the smiles, the fan flicks, the secret gestures. The world may have been more rigid, but hearts were as bold as ever. And just like that, a new story begins, one written in glances, gestures, and whispered promises. The story will continue in the next chapter, where letters, symbols, and secret codes keep love alive, even when lovers must be apart. Love, 500 years ago, wasn't always polite. It didn't always follow rules, and sometimes it was forbidden, because society had rules, families had rules, kings, queens, and priests had rules. And yet, the heart doesn't read manuals. Forbidden love came in many shapes and sizes. Sometimes it was between a noble and a commoner, sometimes between two people from families who really didn't like each other. And sometimes it was just about timing, two people meant to be together, but caught in a world that didn't allow it. Picture a young noblewoman. She's promised to a man she's never met, a match arranged by her father, and yet she finds herself drawn to someone else, a poet who speaks in gentle rhymes, a stable boy with a shy smile, a soldier whose letters arrive secretly in the night. She knows the consequences. She knows the whispers that will spread, the anger that could follow. But she can't stop the way her heart beats faster when he enters the room. Across town, the young man faces his own dilemma. Pursuing her could ruin his life. Even speaking to her openly might bring punishment. And yet, he writes her letters, hiding them in places only she will find. Every word carries risk and hope. Some of the most famous forbidden loves came from the highest levels of society. Take Anne Boleyn and Henry VIII. Their courtship was secret at first, full of letters, gifts, and cautious glances. The stakes, extremely high. One wrong move, and disaster loomed. Or consider the countless stories of lovers separated by religion, war, or social rank. Ordinary peasants fell in love and risked punishment from families who disapproved. Nobles risked scandal and exile for a fleeting chance at affection. In every case, the danger made the connection feel even more intense. Every stolen moment was precious because it could be the last. Forbidden love thrived in quiet corners. A garden at midnight, a small chapel when no one was watching, a balcony where the street below was empty and the stars were bright. In these spaces, lovers whispered not just words, but promises. Promises of devotion, safety, and someday, maybe, a life together. Even a simple touch could carry volumes. A hand held just for a moment, a shoulder brushed while walking, a glance that lasted a heartbeat too long. These were treasures, and they were often dangerous, because if someone saw, there could be consequences. A letter discovered could lead to disgrace. A meeting interrupted could result in punishment. Yet people still risked it. There's something thrilling about forbidden love. Maybe it's the danger, maybe it's the intensity, or maybe, as humans, we just can't resist what we're told we can't have. In the world of the 1500s, lovers learned to communicate in subtle ways. A handkerchief with a hidden message, a fan flicked just so, a token left on a windowsill. They became masters of silence and suggestion, and in doing so, their love often burned brighter than anything allowed by the rules of the world. Even in danger, people found ways to laugh. A young man might hide in a tree outside a lady's window, hoping to see her smile, only to be chased away by her dog. A woman might pretend to be distracted by embroidery while exchanging a secret note, hoping no one notices her blush. Forbidden love wasn't just tense or dramatic. It was human, it was clumsy, it was awkward, and somehow it was beautiful. For many lovers, letters were lifelines. A single sheet of paper could carry hope across miles. A folded parchment, pressed with a kiss, could hold entire conversations. Some letters were poetic, filled with longing. My heart cannot rest. Every moment without you is a winter night without fire. Some were practical. Meet me by the old bridge at sunset. Bring the ribbon I gave you. And some were playful. If you are reading this, then you've caught me in the act of thinking about you again. Consider yourself warned. In every case, these letters became sacred. They were proof that love could exist, even under the strictest rules. What's remarkable about forbidden love is how resilient it was. Separated by miles or by family rules, lovers found ways to maintain connection. They memorized each other's words. They cherished small tokens. They planned secret meetings. Even in the harshest circumstances, war, exile, social pressure, love endured. Sometimes it even triumphed. Sometimes it didn't. But the effort, the courage, the risk, that's what made it unforgettable. Because when you fight for something precious, every moment becomes eternal. So tonight, picture the scene. A noblewoman stands at her window, candlelight flickering across her face. A young man crouches in the shadows, just across the courtyard. He waves a handkerchief. She curtsies ever so slightly. The risk is enormous, but their hearts, beating wildly, don't care. Forbidden love is the quiet rebellion of the heart. It doesn't care about class, family, or rules. It simply exists. And sometimes, just sometimes, it changes the world. So as you imagine the lovers of 500 years ago writing, hiding, whispering, daring, remember, love has always been stubborn. It bends, it hides, it dances around obstacles. It waits in secret corners, it hides in letters, and it lives in hearts, brave enough to pursue it. Because no matter the century, no matter the danger, love always finds a way to speak, even in whispers beneath candlelight. 500 years ago, marriage was a serious business. It wasn't always about love. In fact, for most people, love came second, sometimes way second, to family, duty, and social expectation. Marriage was a contract, a deal, a careful arrangement that affected not just the people, but entire families, estates, and even kingdoms. For the nobility, marriages were like chess moves. A daughter married a man because of his wealth, his land, his connections, or his potential to advance the family status. A single match could unite powerful families or settle disputes that had lasted generations. The bride and groom, they were often little more than pieces on the board, expected to obey, to smile, and to produce heirs. And yet, even in these arrangements, small sparks of affection could appear. Sometimes, love grew slowly in shared meals, gentle conversation, or fleeting glances across a hall. Sometimes, it never came at all. And sometimes, it exploded a quiet respect turning into laughter, laughter turning into longing, longing turning into true companionship. The weddings themselves were elaborate and beautiful. There was hand fasting, where the couple's hands were tied together, literally, as a symbol of their union. There were dowries, carefully calculated and negotiated, sometimes stretching into pages of parchment. There were blessings, often from the church, with candles, music, and prayers for prosperity in children. Imagine standing in a cathedral filled with light, filtering through stained glass. The scent of incense mingles with the sweet smell of flowers. Friends and family watch, whispering polite congratulations and sneaking a curious glance at the bride's expression. For the bride and groom, it was a mixture of excitement, nerves, and a touch of fear. They were stepping into a lifetime of expectation, wrapped in silk and ceremony. Even when marriage was arranged, the human heart had its own plans. A husband might discover that his new wife has a laugh that makes the world feel warmer. A wife might notice that her husband's awkward bow hides a gentle kindness. Sometimes, these small details became the foundation of genuine affection, and sometimes they didn't. But even then, people learned to coexist, finding comfort in routine, shared meals, and small gestures of care. Marriage, even as a contract, could become a space where love slowly grew. And if it didn't, well, people adapted. They found friendship, mutual respect, and even humor to fill the gaps. The dowry was more than money or land. It was a sign of commitment, a kind of security for the bride and her family. Sometimes dowries included jewelry, livestock, or even entire estates. In smaller villages, it might mean tools, linens, or a few cows, but the principle was the same, a promise of provision and care. The gift exchange didn't stop at dowries. Husbands and wives often exchanged small tokens, rings, charms, embroidered handkerchiefs. Each item carried a message. I will care for you. I remember you. I see you. Even when love wasn't the reason for marriage, these gestures could make the union warmer, softer, more human. Marriage looked different depending on where you lived. In noble courts, it was a public spectacle, processions, feasts, and hundreds of witnesses. For commoners, it might be a simple church ceremony, followed by a modest feast with friends and neighbors. But across all classes, marriage carried expectations, fidelity, cooperation, and children. It was a contract written in both law and tradition, and breaking it could have serious consequences. For some, marriage felt like stepping into a cage. A young noblewoman might look at her new husband and feel nothing. A peasant man might marry the girl next door simply because it's expected, even if his heart is elsewhere. And yet, people found ways to make it work. They discovered that affection could grow, that humor could soften rigidity, that small acts of kindness could create warmth where none seemed possible. Marriage might start as duty, but it didn't always stay that way. In the evenings, after the feast and fanfare, the bride and groom would find themselves alone. Sometimes it was awkward. Sometimes it was comfortable, and sometimes it was magical. A shared smile in candlelight, a whispered joke, a gentle hand on the shoulder. In these quiet moments, marriage became more than a contract. It became a partnership, a bond, a tiny universe shared between two people. And in those rare, tender moments, love, even if it hadn't existed before, could take root. Historical records give glimpses of marriages that blossomed in surprising ways. A noblewoman, married young and reluctantly, discovered that her husband was not just a man of status, but also of wit and compassion. They wrote letters, exchanged gifts, and eventually fell in love. A merchant and his bride, initially strangers, found joy in shared chores, storytelling, and laughter over burnt bread. The lesson: love often finds a way, even when the world insists it shouldn't. Marriage, of course, wasn't always poetic. There were awkward dinners, misunderstandings, and arguments over who washed the dishes, or, in the noble case, who arranged the banquet. But these moments also made life human. They created stories, inside jokes, and memories that would last a lifetime, even if they started with duty rather than desire. Sometimes, a simple laugh could transform the coldest contract into something warm, something shared, something almost romantic. So, as you imagine the world of 500 years ago, picture a grand hall filled with candles, laughter, and careful eyes. A bride and groom stand together, heartbeats uncertain, hands tied, futures unknown. Some marriages would become passionate, some tender, and some merely functional. But every single one began with courage. The courage to step into a lifelong contract, to navigate duty and expectation, and to find space for humanity within it. And in those quiet moments, a shared glance, a whispered word, a touch of humor, marriage became more than law or duty. It became a chance for love, in whatever form it could take. Because even in a world that demanded obedience, hearts had a way of speaking softly, gently, and persistently. And that, perhaps, is the most timeless story of all. Love in the 1500s didn't always speak in words. Sometimes it spoke in objects, small, precious, meaningful. A token of love could be a locket, a ring, a handkerchief, a pressed flower, or even a tiny ribbon. It was never about the price. It was about the thought, the care, and the hidden meaning behind it. These little treasures were proof. Someone was thinking of you. Someone cared. Someone dared to say it without words. A locket might contain a lock of hair. A ring could be engraved with initials, a date, or a secret motto. A handkerchief might bear delicate embroidery, flowers, hearts, or symbols only the giver and receiver could understand. Every item told a story. Every token was a message, carefully wrapped in secrecy or ceremony. Imagine receiving a tiny embroidered pouch, folded neatly in your palm. You open it and find a pressed flower, carefully dried, with a note. "This reminds me of the morning I first saw you. May it keep you in my thoughts as I am in yours." It's small, simple, but it carries a universe of feeling. For women, embroidery was more than decoration. It was a language, a stitch in a corner of a handkerchief, a hidden heart under a hem, a delicate flower tucked into a sleeve. These were messages. One small emblem could say, "I am thinking of you," or "Our secret is safe." And for those who knew the code, the meaning was unmistakable. Embroidery turned quiet moments into declarations of love, and the act of creating the gift, thread carefully chosen, stitch by stitch, became a meditation, a silent conversation with the heart. Rings and lockets were popular for a reason. They were portable, personal, and often intimate. A simple ring, slipped onto a finger during a meeting, or secretly given under a table, could be a promise of devotion. A locket could hide a tiny portrait, a lock of hair, or even a folded note. Jewelry was a way to carry someone with you, a constant reminder that they existed in your world, even when you were apart. Sometimes these gifts were playful, a ring with a clever engraving, a pendant shaped like a key, or a brooch that might mean one thing in public but another in private. The thrill wasn't in the value, but in the shared secret. Flowers were language too, delicate, fleeting, fragrant. A violet could symbolize loyalty, a red rose, passion, a lily, purity. A lover might press a flower between pages, leaving it for the other to find, or place a tiny blossom in a letter, knowing the scent might linger weeks after it arrived. Even a small pebble, a feather, or a seashell could become a token, chosen because it reminded the giver of a shared moment, a joke, or a secret memory. Nature became the messenger, subtle and patient. Love wasn't always grand. Sometimes it was found in the smallest things. A ribbon tied to a cloak, a carved wooden figure, a book with a note tucked inside, or even a loaf of bread shaped into a heart. These gestures were quiet but profound. They were a way to say, "I notice you, I remember you, you matter to me." Every object carried weight, because it wasn't just a thing, it was a piece of someone's heart. Across Europe and beyond, tokens of love had different forms but the same purpose: connection. In Italy, lovers exchanged poems alongside jewelry. In France, handkerchiefs embroidered with tiny symbols were prized gifts. In England, pressed flowers and ribbons held secret meanings. Even in Japan, small charms, delicate origami, or hair ornaments conveyed affection. No matter the place, the principle was universal. Love wanted to be expressed, even if words were too risky, too slow, or too delicate. Sometimes, tokens could be amusing. A young man might carve a wooden spoon with a ridiculous poem, only to have the lady laugh at his awkward attempt. A mischievous girl might slip a pebble into a pocket with a note that said, "To remind you of the time you fell into the stream." Even in these small jokes, there was affection. Humor was a secret glue, a way to share closeness without saying it out loud. The imperfections made the tokens human. They made the giver real, alive, and memorable. Perhaps the most important thing about tokens of love wasn't the objects themselves, it was what they represented. Patience, the time taken to choose or create the gift. Attention, noticing what mattered to the other person. Courage, the risk of giving it in a world where it might be frowned upon or misunderstood. Every token was a tangible heartbeat, a proof of thought, feeling, and memory. So imagine now, a young woman carefully unfolds a handkerchief, a flower, a note, a stitch in the corner, a quiet conversation across miles or moments. A young man places a locket on a table, watching nervously as the lady picks it up. The objects themselves are simple, ordinary, but in their simplicity lies magic. Because love, 500 years ago, didn't need grand declarations. It needed attention, care, and the courage to say "I see you" in subtle, lasting ways. These tokens of love, rings, flowers, ribbons, embroidered handkerchiefs, carried hearts across distance and danger. They turned quiet moments into memories. They whispered promises when words were impossible. and centuries later, we still understand their language. Love has always been in the little things, and in those little things, it lives forever. Love is universal, but the ways people express it can be wildly different. 500 years ago, romance wasn't confined to one country or culture. It traveled, adapted, and flourished in forms as diverse as the landscapes it crossed. From Europe's cobblestone streets to the delicate gardens of Japan, from the poetry-filled courts of Persia to bustling marketplaces in Africa, people found ways to show affection, admiration, and longing. In Europe, romance often carried the weight of chivalry. Knights, poets, and merchants participated in elaborate gestures to win hearts. A Spanish knight might ride across town to present a token to a lady, a glove, a ribbon, or even a poem he composed himself. An English poet might pen sonnets, full of longing, and arrange for a minstrel to deliver them outside the lady's window. Courtly love dominated the upper classes, an idealized, sometimes impossible form of devotion, where longing and admiration were almost theatrical. Yet in small villages, love could be simple. A stolen glance at a harvest dance, a ribbon tied to a cloak, a shared loaf of bread. Even in Europe, across social strata, love thrived in secret and in ritual, in grand gestures and in quiet, fleeting moments. In Japan, the art of love was refined, subtle, and deeply poetic. Inspired by centuries of Heian court culture, lovers wrote waka or tonka, short poems capturing fleeting emotions and natural beauty. A single verse could carry the weight of a lifetime of feeling. Gifts were often small and thoughtful. A painted fan, a carefully folded piece of origami, or a silk scarf might convey a message that words could not. Even the choice of flower or the arrangement of petals could symbolize affection. The Japanese approach to romance emphasized restraint, elegance, and patience. Love was a quiet conversation with nature and the heart, rather than a public declaration. In the Middle East, love had a musical and lyrical heart. Courts were filled with poets and musicians who composed ghazals, songs and poems about longing, devotion, and the agony and ecstasy of love. A young man might memorize verses to recite in the presence of his beloved. A lady might respond with subtle gestures, applause, or a secret smile. Gifts were often symbolic: a jewel, a hand-woven scarf, or a delicate perfume. Even when society imposed strict rules on interactions between men and women, art allowed love to breathe. Poetry, music, and performance became secret corridors for the heart. Across Africa, romance often intertwined with community and storytelling. In many cultures, courtship involved songs passed from one generation to the next, recounting tales of bravery, fidelity, and desire. Love was not only personal but communal. Songs, dances, and festivals allowed young men and women to meet, celebrate, and express interest within the safety of ritual. Gifts could be simple: beads, carved figurines, or a small crafted item. But even these objects carried stories, meanings, and intentions that resonated deeply within the culture. Love was embedded in daily life, nature, and tradition, a constant, living rhythm. In the Americas, indigenous peoples expressed affection through ceremonies, symbolic gifts, and shared experiences. A young couple might exchange crafted items, feathers, or painted designs, each carrying meaning and intention. Shared dances and storytelling were crucial. Connection was built through participation in community rituals and a deep awareness of the natural world. Even in a world that would soon face dramatic change, the ways people expressed love remained poetic, meaningful, and rooted in attention, care, and shared experience. Across continents, the themes are similar: attention and care in selecting gifts, gestures, or words, courage in expressing feeling, even within restrictive social norms, patience and subtlety, waiting for the right moment, conveying meaning with thought and creativity. Whether through letters, poetry, dance, or objects, love found its way. It adapted to culture, geography, and circumstance, but its essence, longing, admiration, hope, remained the same. It's fascinating to realize that 500 years ago, someone in a Japanese garden might feel the same flutter in their chest as a peasant in France, or a merchant in Persia. Love was human, universal, and timeless. Even across borders, humor played a role. A Japanese poem might tease a beloved's absent-mindedness. A European sonnet could exaggerate a minor mishap to make the lady smile. An African song could include playful teasing about a young man's clumsiness. Love often thrives in laughter, across time and culture. A shared smile, a small joke, a playful gesture. These are threads that connect hearts across continents. Even in grand traditions, love was often in the details, sending a flower, token, or poem, learning a beloved's favorite melody, whispering a secret in a crowded room. These small acts were universal. They created intimacy, connection, and memory. Distance, rules, and culture could never fully suppress the heart's desire to reach another. So as you imagine the world 500 years ago, picture it as a tapestry. Each culture adds a thread, a Spanish knight presenting a ribbon, a Japanese poet writing a verse, a Persian musician singing under a moonlit sky, an African storyteller weaving tales of longing, a young couple exchanging a carved token in the Americas. Each thread is unique, but together they tell the same story. Love, patient and persistent, finds a way to be expressed. Even when separated by mountains, oceans, or rules, the human heart knows how to speak. Through gifts, gestures, poetry, and song, love traveled across borders, echoing the same emotions we feel today. And that is perhaps the most comforting truth. Love, in all its diversity, is universal. It transcends language, culture, and time. Even 500 years ago, hearts were not so different from ours. They hoped, they longed, they played, they risked, and they remembered. Love may take many forms, but its essence remains the same. If love in the 1500s had a voice, it was often written. Words on parchment, pressed with a kiss, folded with care, carried hope across days, weeks, sometimes months. Letters were more than communication. They were hearts made tangible. In a world without phones, without instant messaging, without emojis, letters were how people shared longing, joy, desire, and worry. Writing a love letter wasn't just putting words on paper. It was an act of courage, because every sentence could be intercepted, every folded parchment could be discovered. A careless word might invite scandal, so lovers wrote carefully. They chose words like jewels, polished and precious. Even spelling mistakes became part of the charm, a quirk of humanity preserved for centuries. Imagine a man dipping his quill in ink, heart racing as he writes, "My dearest, though the wind carries me far from your sight, I feel your presence with every breath I take. The candle's flame reminds me of your eyes, and I count the days until I may see you again." And then folding the parchment, pressing it to his lips, and sending it with a trusted messenger. Love letters weren't just for nobles or poets. A peasant girl might slip a note into her beloved's basket of herbs. A sailor might carve a message into a small piece of wood and give it to his sweetheart before leaving on a long voyage. The form changed, the words changed, but the heart behind them stayed the same. Even today, reading these letters, centuries later, feels like eavesdropping on a secret conversation. Tender, urgent, human. Some love letters have survived because they belonged to kings, queens, and nobles. Anne Boleyn and Henry VIII, before their courtship was public. Letters carried private admiration, longing, and subtle negotiation of risk. Mary, Queen of Scots, wrote to her betrothed, expressing both desire and strategy, love intertwined with politics. But perhaps the most poignant are those from ordinary people. A soldier at war, writing to his wife, "My heart cannot rest. Every dawn is grey without you beside me. If fate is cruel, know that my love is endless." Or a young woman writing to her lover in secret, "I hide this letter under my pillow, so it may be near my heart even when you are not." Each letter is a tiny window into a soul, fragile, earnest, and alive. Waiting was part of the magic. A letter might take weeks to arrive. Sometimes it would get lost in travel, ruined by rain, or stolen by curious hands. But that waiting made the words heavier, more meaningful. Every sentence became a heartbeat, every word a sigh. When the reply finally came, it was like receiving a small miracle. The paper felt warmer because of the care it carried. The ink seemed to pulse with emotion. Lovers got creative. They used hidden messages, ciphers, and codes to conceal meaning. Flowers pressed between pages carried secret symbolism. Even the fold of a letter could indicate urgency, affection, or secrecy. Some letters were playful, teasing the recipient. "If you are reading this, then you've caught me thinking of you again. Consider yourself warned." Others were solemn, reflecting the depth of feeling that circumstances often made dangerous. "I risk my life to tell you this. but I cannot keep my heart silent any longer. Each letter was a bridge across distance and danger, a lifeline to the person who mattered most. Love letters weren't always serious. Some included jokes about missed meetings, clumsy gestures, or shared moments of absurdity. A playful line could soften the anxiety of a long separation. If only your eyes were here. Perhaps you could stop me from tripping over my own feet in your absence. Even humor carried devotion. It reminded the reader that the person on the other end of the letter was alive, thinking and feeling intimately connected across space. The beauty of these letters is that they outlasted the people who wrote them. Centuries later, we can open them and feel the flutter of a heart long gone. We can imagine the candle flickering beside a young woman as she reads a note. We can hear the sighs of a man who sealed a letter with trembling fingers. Letters preserved emotion in a way that spoken words could not. They were deliberate, thoughtful, and tangible. Love made real in ink and paper. Tonight, imagine yourself holding a folded letter sealed with wax. The words inside are private, fragile, alive. A hand pressed the paper to their lips. A heart hoped, trembled, and sent it across the miles. Love letters from 500 years ago teach us something timeless. Courage is part of love. Patience can deepen connection. Small, deliberate acts of care are powerful. Humor, tenderness, and playfulness survive even in distance and danger. And even now, centuries later, the human heart can feel the pulse of these words. It's a whisper across time. I see you, I remember you, I love you. Because no matter how many years pass, letters from the heart carry the same magic. They make invisible emotions tangible, and they keep love alive. And that, perhaps, is one of the gentlest comforts for bedtime. Love, patient and careful, always finds a way to speak, even through paper and ink. 500 years ago, love wasn't just a matter of hearts and letters. It was also a matter of science, or what people thought was science, and a lot of superstition. People tried to understand attraction, predict it, and even control it. And sometimes their methods were a little unusual. Back then, people believed in the four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow, bile, and black bile. Your temperament, they thought, was determined by the balance of these humors, and so was your capacity for love. A sanguine person, warm and cheerful, might be naturally passionate. A melancholic person, thoughtful and moody, might be prone to longing and deep devotion. Doctors, or anyone claiming to understand the humors, might give advice. Eat certain foods to attract love. Wear specific colors to appear more desirable. Avoid particular habits that might cool your affection. People really believed that love could be guided by the right combination of diet, exercise, and temperament. The stars were also consulted for matters of the heart. Astrologers examined the positions of planets to determine compatibility. A letter might even mention the stars. The moon rises in your sign tonight, and so my heart hopes for your favor. Astrology offered a framework to explain attraction, to plan courtship, and to predict when the stars would favor love. Sometimes it worked as encouragement, sometimes as a comforting excuse when love didn't go as planned. And then there were love potions. Herbs, flowers, and mysterious concoctions were believed to stir desire, deepen affection, or secure devotion. A few drops of rose water, a sprig of rosemary, or a pinch of something secret might be added to food or drink, always with the hope of magical results. Charms and talismans were popular too. A ring with a secret inscription, a pendant blessed under the right moon, a stitched symbol hidden in clothing. People mixed science and superstition freely, believing that the right combination of knowledge and ritual could make love inevitable. Even the smallest events could be interpreted as omens. Seeing a certain bird might predict meeting a lover. Dreams could foretell passion, separation, or reunion. A particular flower blooming at the right moment might indicate hope or danger. In some ways, superstition offered hope in uncertain times. It reminded lovers that the universe was watching, that fate might smile upon them, and that magic could be found in the ordinary. Of course, not all beliefs were serious. Some people carried odd objects for love: a dried frog, a strangely shaped pebble, or even a coin with peculiar markings. Recipes for love potions could be laughably elaborate: a dash of rose petals, a whisper of moonlight, and a pinch of whatever else you find lying around. Yet humor and charm were part of the process. The absurdity of some rituals didn't make them less meaningful, it made them human. Even today, we smile at the idea of stirring a potion in hopes that someone will fall in love with us. But back then, it was a sincere attempt to understand a mysterious force, the heart. People didn't see a contradiction between science and superstition. A balanced humor, a favorable star, a clever potion, and a hidden charm, all could work together. Love was treated as both art and science. Observation, careful planning, and ritual could increase the odds of affection. Playfulness, charm, and wit added warmth. Hope and imagination kept hearts alive, even in the strictest social rules. It was a delicate dance, logic and magic intertwined, each giving the heart a chance to thrive. Even ordinary folk embraced superstitions and small rituals. A young woman might carry a sprig of rosemary in her pocket when meeting a suitor. A young man might whisper a charm before delivering a token. Families might consult astrologers before promising a daughter in marriage. In everyday life, these little acts gave structure, meaning, and comfort. They reminded people that love was powerful, delicate, and worth careful attention. So tonight, imagine a young couple 500 years ago. A man dips a quill, composing a letter under candlelight. He wears a charm to ensure her affection. The stars shine in alignment, or so he hopes. The young woman tucks a sprig of rosemary into her sleeve, feeling the universe watch over her. Love was part observation, part ritual, part poetry, and part whimsy. It was serious and playful, practical and magical. Even in a world ruled by rules, science, and superstition, hearts found ways to speak, to hope, and to dream. They wrote letters, pressed flowers, embroidered secret messages, whispered charms, all in the name of the most universal of human experiences. And perhaps that's what makes history so gentle for bedtime. Even centuries ago, love was tender, curious, brave, and a little bit magical, because hearts, no matter the era, always find ways to reach one another, through ritual, charm, or a quietly whispered hope beneath the stars. Love, 500 years ago, wasn't always convenient. It was rarely easy, and sometimes it was tested in ways that would make modern hearts shiver with patience and longing. Distance, war, arranged separations, illness, and early death were constant companions in life. And love, delicate and stubborn, had to navigate them all. Imagine a young man leaving his village to fight in a distant war. He carries a small token from his beloved, a ribbon, a locket, a pressed flower, and hopes it brings him comfort as much as it brings her reassurance. Weeks pass, months, letters take forever to arrive. Sometimes they don't arrive at all, and yet love survives. Every letter received is treasured, reread, pressed between pages for safekeeping. Every token is held close, a tangible heartbeat across the miles. Distance transforms small gestures into lifelines, small words into declarations of endurance. Not all separations were voluntary. Young women promised to one man might find themselves married to another by family decision. Noble heirs might be sent to distant courts for alliances, leaving hearts longing at home. In these situations, lovers found subtle ways to maintain connection. A secret letter hidden under a pillow, a token passed discreetly through friends or servants, a glance across a crowded festival, recognizing familiarity in a fleeting moment. Love learned patience, persistence, and ingenuity because hearts refused to be silenced. Life was fragile. Disease, childbirth, accidents, and war claimed lives unexpectedly. Many couples faced heartbreak, either anticipating it or enduring it. Some were torn apart by tragedy, their love stories ending before they could truly begin. Others persevered, clinging to memories, letters, and tokens of shared affection. This fragility made love feel more precious, more urgent, and infinitely more human. Every smile, every whispered word, every secret meeting was a gift because the future was never guaranteed. Some relationships endured despite hardship. Two lovers separated by miles might maintain affection through letters, small gifts, and coded messages. Arranged marriages sometimes blossomed over years of patience, as mutual respect and understanding slowly grew into love. Even long-standing friendships often transformed into quiet devotion, built over time and shared endurance. The test of time gave love depth. It made every tender moment sweeter, every reunion more meaningful. Consider a soldier away at war, writing faithfully to his beloved, "I count the stars each night and imagine them shining upon your face. Until I return, I am yours in thought and heart alone." Or a noblewoman, married against her will, writing secretly to a childhood friend, "Though duty keeps us apart, My soul remembers you with every heartbeat. If ever the fates are kind, we may meet again. These words, filled with longing, patience, and hope, are timeless reminders. Love is stronger when nurtured through challenge. In enduring love, small rituals mattered. A folded ribbon placed on a windowsill, a flower pressed between pages, a daily prayer whispered for the safety of a distant beloved. These tiny acts, repeated and cherished, became anchors in turbulent lives. They offered reassurance, continuity, and a sense of control in a world full of uncertainty. Even in the absence of grand gestures, love persisted in these quiet, meaningful ways. Even when life was difficult, lovers found ways to laugh. A soldier might jokingly scold his beloved in letters for being too cautious or for misplacing a gift. A wife might tease her husband about his messy handwriting in urgent letters. These playful notes provided comfort, reminding both that love could endure not only hardship but also the small absurdities of life. Humor softened the melancholy. It kept hearts connected in gentle, human ways. Enduring love demanded courage. The courage to write when fear and distance made words risky. The courage to wait when months could pass without news. The courage to cherish memories and small tokens when circumstances kept lovers apart. These challenges shaped people as much as the love itself. Those who persevered were strengthened by patience, devotion, and a quiet kind of bravery. Picture it now. A young couple, separated by miles, sits in quiet rooms under candlelight. He writes, pressing his heart into every word. She reads, clutching a locket, imagining his face in the flickering glow. Time may be cruel, distance may test them, fate may intervene, and yet, love endures. It survives letters, tokens, and whispers. It survives hardship, patience, and quiet hope. Because true love, even when tested by time, doesn't vanish. It lingers in memory, in action, in devotion. It persists in the smallest gestures, the faintest words, the gentlest tokens carried across days, months, and even years. And that is a comforting thought for bedtime. Hearts that care, hearts that wait, and hearts that endure are never truly separated. Love, tested and patient, always finds its way home. Love, 500 years ago, wasn't supposed to be simple, and for many, it wasn't supposed to be free either. There were rules, unspoken ones, written ones, rules about who could love whom, when, and how. But every now and then, someone broke them, and when they did, oh, the world took notice. 5 centuries ago, love was rarely a private affair. Your heart didn't always belong to you. It belonged to your family, your class, your church, or your country. Marrying beneath your station, scandalous. Falling in love before your betrothal, foolish. Loving someone of a different faith, or from another land, practically treasonous. But here's the thing about hearts. They've never been good at following orders. Even in the strictest courts and the smallest villages, love found ways to disobey. Some of the most beautiful and heartbreaking love stories in history belong to those who refused to let society dictate their hearts. Take, for example, the noblewoman who fell in love with her guard, or the monk who left his monastery for the woman he couldn't stop thinking about, or the merchantess daughter who ran away with the musician who played beneath her window every night. These weren't stories of logic. They were stories of passion, of people who'd rather risk ruin than live without love. Let's paint the picture. A young nobleman, destined for a political marriage, meets a common village girl at a summer fair. They talk, they laugh. He's supposed to forget her, but doesn't. She's supposed to keep her distance, but can't. Soon, their stolen moments become their world. A secret meeting under a full moon, a hurried letter, a promise whispered through tears. It's dangerous, foolish, and utterly human, because love that defies the rules burns differently, bright, brief, unforgettable. For women, breaking the rules was even riskier. Society told them how to live, what to wear, whom to marry, and even how to feel. But some said no. There were women who turned down arranged marriages, women who fled convents to be with the ones they loved, and women who wrote poetry, yes, love poems, in an age when speaking too freely could ruin reputations. One might imagine them writing late at night, candlelight flickering. Their words are rebellion in ink. They say I should be silent, but my heart refuses to be quiet. Their courage still whispers to us today, the quiet defiance of those who refused to let duty silence desire. Even kings and queens weren't immune to forbidden love. King Henry VIII defied the church itself for Anne Boleyn, a love that literally changed the course of history. It cost kingdoms, crowns, and, tragically, Anne's life. But it also showed that even power bows to the pull of the heart. Then there's the story of King Edward VIII, centuries later, who gave up his throne for the woman he loved, a gesture that still feels like a fairy tale with a bittersweet twist. Different times, same truth. Love makes even the mightiest falter. Forbidden love was the heartbeat of art. Poets, troubadours, and writers turned rebellion into romance, and heartbreak into melody. When they couldn't live their love, they wrote it. When they couldn't hold their beloved, they described them in ink, in song, in secret sighs between lines of verse. Their words outlived the walls that divided them. If I cannot hold you, let my words embrace you instead. Even now, centuries later, those verses remind us that love's rebellion was never just in action, it was in expression. Of course, not every rule-breaking love story ended happily. Some lovers were caught and punished, separated, banished, even executed. Society was cruel to those who dared to love too freely. Yet even in tragedy, their stories endured, because people saw something of themselves in them, that yearning to choose love over expectation, to live honestly, even if briefly. And isn't that the most human thing of all? Not all defiance was loud. Sometimes it was as simple as a glance held too long, a hand brushed in secret, or a promise whispered in the dark. These small acts were their own kind of bravery, because in a world full of rules, loving quietly, secretly, sincerely, could be the boldest thing of all. And maybe that's why these old love stories still touch us. They remind us that love doesn't always shout. Sometimes it simply stays, even when it shouldn't. 500 years ago, love had boundaries, class, religion, family, reputation, and yet, time after time, people crossed them, some for passion, some for hope, some simply because they couldn't live any other way. Love that defied the rules was never just about rebellion. It was about truth, the kind that says, I see you, I choose you, even if the world says I shouldn't. And maybe, as you drift to sleep tonight, that's something to smile about, that across centuries and stories, hearts have always found the courage to love anyway. Because in the end, rules fade, kingdoms fall, and even history moves on. But love, real, reckless, rule-breaking, love, always leaves its mark. And now, we drift toward the quiet end of our journey. The candles have burned low, the music of the old world has faded into memory, and we find ourselves sitting in the hush of reflection. 500 years of love, whispered, written, hidden, sung, all of it, somehow, still lingers, because love never really leaves, it just changes shape. Think of it, all those couples who once looked at each other by firelight, the farmers, the poets, the queens, and the dreamers, they're gone, yes, but their feelings, they echo through time. Every letter tucked into a chest, every pressed flower left in an old book, every poem scratched in faded ink, all of them are little time capsules of love. If you listen closely, it's almost like you can still hear them. I am thinking of you. Wait for me. I love you. Still, the words might be 5 centuries old, but the heartbeat behind them feels familiar. It's funny when you think about it, how love today still feels like love back then. Sure, we've traded hand-delivered letters for text messages and moonlit serenades for Spotify playlists. We can talk across oceans in seconds now, and yet, the feeling's the same. The nervous excitement before a first meeting, the ache of waiting for a reply, the warmth of being seen, truly seen, by someone who understands you. Those things haven't changed at all. 500 years later, the language of love, the real kind, still sounds the same, even if the tools have changed. There's a quiet beauty in realizing that love doesn't belong to just one era. It's been carried forward through generations, through wars, through silence and song, like a thread running through a vast tapestry, connecting one century to the next. Every time someone holds another's hand, or writes, I miss you, or whispers, be safe, that thread glows a little brighter. And if you could stand back and look at it all, millions of tiny glowing threads through time, UDC1, endless, golden pattern, the story of love itself. Sometimes, love leaves echoes in the strangest places. Maybe it's an old locket found in a drawer with initials no one remembers, or a faded letter tucked behind a painting, or a name carved into the trunk of a centuries-old tree. Little traces of hearts that once beat fast, proof that someone once cared deeply. And though those people are gone, the tenderness they felt still hums faintly in the world, like a note that never quite fades from the air. The lovers of 500 years ago would probably have a few things to say if they could speak to us now. They'd remind us that love isn't about perfection, it's about effort, that letters matter, not because they're fancy, but because they carry sincerity. That small gestures, a smile, a touch, a word, can mean everything when the world feels uncertain. They might tell us to slow down, to really look at the people we love, to listen, because in their time, every word and every glance mattered. And maybe that's something we've lost a little, the patience to love slowly. They also understood something else, that love doesn't always last forever, and that's okay. Some loves were short, like candles flickering in a storm. Others burned steady for a lifetime, but each one was real while it existed. Each one taught something. Each one left an imprint on the heart that carried it. Even when lovers parted, or the world changed, or centuries rolled by, the echo remained. Because love, even when it ends, always leaves a trace of light. If you've ever read an old love letter, you know the feeling, that quiet ache in the chest, like the world's softest nostalgia. You can almost imagine the faces, the sighs, the moments that inspired those words. It makes you realize how much humans have always needed to connect. And in that realization, there's comfort. We're part of something huge and timeless, this endless, stubborn, hopeful tradition of reaching out and saying, "You matter to me." 500 years from now, someone might look back at us, at our texts, our songs, our photos, our silly little love notes, and maybe they'll smile because it'll sound familiar. They'll recognize themselves in us, the same way we recognize ourselves in those who came before. The details change, but the heart, it never does. So as you lie here now, eyes heavy, world quiet, imagine those lovers from long ago, walking under the same moon we see tonight. They whispered promises under candlelight. They waited for letters by the door. They hoped, they cried, they laughed, they forgave, just like we do. Time has changed everything, and nothing at all. Love still burns, still trembles, still finds a way through the dark. And if you listen closely enough, you can almost hear it, the soft echoes of every heart that ever dared to love, still humming through the centuries. The world is quiet now. The candles have melted into soft pools of wax, and the stars outside hang like silver secrets in the sky. Tonight, we've wandered through centuries, through castles and cottages, through poems and promises, through laughter and heartbreak. And as the echoes of those old stories fade, something gentle remains. It's as if those ancient hearts still want to whisper to us, one last time. So imagine, for a moment, that they've written to you, yes, you, across the ages. Their words carried not on parchment, but through time itself. A letter unfolds, edges yellowed with centuries. Dear heart of the future, we see your world spinning fast, faster than a quill can write, faster than a candle burns. You have voices that reach across oceans, yet somehow you forget to pause and listen. Slow down. Love is not meant to be chased, it's meant to be noticed. In our time, we waited weeks for a letter. We stood by windows hoping for a glimpse. Every moment was a story, every silence a heartbeat. Do not fear the wait. Sometimes love blooms best when given time to breathe, and you can almost feel the patience of that voice, calm, steady, reminding us that even now, in our world of instant everything, love still needs room to grow. Another letter, written in soft, trembling ink. Dearest soul, we know what it feels like to give your heart and see it break. We, too, have watched loves fade like candlelight at dawn. But please remember this, not all endings are failures. Some are beginnings in disguise. In our time, we loved knowing it might not last. We loved anyway, because even one moment of real connection is worth a lifetime of silence. So heal, gently, keep your heart open. The world still has more love to offer, and more love to give you. A pause, a deep breath. It's almost like those voices from long ago are placing a comforting hand on your shoulder. This letter is short, written with care, maybe by a poet or a dreamer. Sweet soul, do not mistake being alone for being unworthy. Even the moon spends nights without the sun. In our world, there were many who waited quietly, faithfully, believing their time would come. And it did, when they least expected it. Your love story might not have started yet, but that doesn't mean it isn't being written. Be patient. You are not waiting for love. Love is finding its way to you. You smile without meaning to. because somehow that one feels personal. This one is sealed with a faint, waxy heart. To the blessed ones who have found what many seek, remember, love is not a thing you own. It is a garden you tend. Water it with kindness, feed it with laughter, protect it with forgiveness. Do not let pride steal your peace. Do not let routine make you forget the miracle you hold. And if ever you grow weary, sit together under the stars, and remember, this same sky once looked down upon us, the same stars, the same hopes. Only the hands have changed. It's simple advice, timeless, gentle, and true. This letter feels older, fragile, the words nearly fading. Dear one, we, too, have lost what we could not keep. Lovers who went to war, promises broken by time, names carved into stone before their story was finished. And yet we remember them with peace, because to have loved at all is to have lived deeply. If your heart aches, let it that ache is proof that you once felt something true. Grieve, but do not turn bitter. The world needs hearts that have known loss, for only they can understand tenderness. The sound of that letter fades softly, like rain on a window. The last letter opens like a sigh, written in flowing script, a mix of centuries and hope. To every dreamer still awake, remember that love is not just found in romance. It lives in friendship, in family, in kindness, in every small act that says, I care. We spent lifetimes chasing one kind of love, but in the end, it was the simple moments that mattered most. The shared bread, the laughter, the touch of a hand that said, I see you. So wherever you find love, cherish it. It may not look like the songs we sang, but it is still the same song. And then, all the voices fade into one, a whisper through time, like 1,000 pages turning at once. They say, we were here before you, you are here now, others will come after, but the story of love, it continues, always. And in that quiet realization, you feel something, a warmth that isn't from any candle or fire, but from the knowledge that you're part of that endless story. The same story whispered beneath candlelight, written in letters, sung beneath moonlit balconies. The same story that never ends. Love, in all its forms, remains. So, tonight, as you drift towards sleep, let that be your final thought. You are not alone in your longing, your laughter, your hope. Across centuries, across oceans, across time itself, someone, somewhere, has felt exactly what you feel now. And in that truth, you are connected to every heart that ever dared to love. The night deepens. Somewhere beyond your window, the wind moves softly through the trees, like a memory trying to speak. You've traveled through centuries of hearts and hands, of words whispered and promises kept. But now, as the old stories fall silent, a question lingers. What echoes do we leave behind? In every age, love has left its mark, not only in grand gestures, but in the smallest, quietest moments. A sailor, carving initials into the wood of his ship before sailing into the unknown. A mother humming her child to sleep, her song carrying through generations. A poet scribbling words by candlelight, never knowing if anyone would read them. These small things, these fragments of tenderness, become echoes that live far longer than their makers. Perhaps that is the truest legacy, not the things we build or the riches we keep, but the warmth we leave in others. Centuries ago, people believed that words had souls, that once spoken, they never truly died. They floated in the air, waiting to be remembered. And maybe that's true, because if you listen closely, you can still hear them, the soft murmur of the past, carried on wind and wave. Be kind, be patient, love again, even if it hurts. Those were the words they left for us, the gentle teachings written not in ink, but in living hearts. A quiet moment. Imagine if someone, centuries from now, found your story, not a famous one, not a tale sung by minstrels or written in books, but yours, the way you laugh, the way you forgive, the way you care, even when no one's watching. Would they feel it? Would they sense the love you've left in the world? Like footprints in sand. You might never know. But that's the beautiful truth of legacy. It doesn't need to be seen to exist. Maybe one day, a stranger will feel courage because of something kind you said. Maybe a friend will remember your words in a dark hour. Maybe your love, though quiet, will ripple through time, reaching hearts you'll never meet. This too is how history is written, not just in battles or empires, but in the invisible threads of compassion that connect us all. And if the people of the past could speak now, they would remind us, we were once like you. We loved, we feared, we hoped, we made mistakes, but we tried, and that was enough. It's humbling, isn't it, to realize that the people we study in history, the ones whose names we barely remember, were once alive in the same way we are. They felt rain on their skin, heard laughter echoing down stone streets, and dreamed of being remembered. So maybe tonight, under this same old sky, you can whisper your own promise into the dark. I will leave behind something gentle, not perfect, not grand, just gentle. Because gentleness, once released, has a strange way of returning again and again, like a song through time. And that, perhaps, is the truest immortality. The echoes we leave behind are not carved in stone, they are carried in hearts. As the candle burns low and the pages of history begin to close, you realize something simple yet profound. Love doesn't belong to any one century. It has always been and will always be the quiet heartbeat of the human story. So let the world rush on. Let time move as it must. And when you breathe tonight, remember your love, too, is part of history. Even the smallest kindness becomes an echo in eternity. The stars are dimming now. The sea is calm. The story is almost over. But before we say goodnight, let's drift once more into that liminal space, the quiet shore where the past and present meet. It's here, in the stillness, that time finally exhales. Picture it. The sailors have returned home. The lovers have written their last letters. The poets have put down their quills. The world has grown quiet. And yet, somehow, everything feels alive. You can hear the tide breathing softly, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. It's as if time has decided to rest, not end, but simply sleep. If you listen close, you can hear it. The rhythm of existence, slow and steady. The pulse of generations gone, and yet not forgotten. You realize we are all just travelers, drifting between dawn and dusk, borrowing moments from eternity. And maybe that's enough. In the age of exploration, sailors believed that beyond the edge of the map was a place where the world simply fell away, where sky met sea in one infinite horizon. But when they finally reached it, they didn't find an end. They found more world, more stars, more stories, more mystery. And that is the secret of time, too. Even when it feels like we've reached the end, there's always something beyond the horizon, something unseen, yet waiting. So as we close this story, as your eyes grow heavy and your thoughts begin to drift, remember that the past never truly leaves us. It sleeps. It rests in songs, in books, in love letters, in the way the wind still smells like salt, in the way moonlight still brushes against skin, the same way it did centuries ago. Somewhere, a candle flickers in an old room. A sailor dreams of home. A child in a distant century falls asleep to a story, perhaps this one, and the circle completes itself. There is a quiet comfort in knowing that everything we are is part of something vast and continuous. That love, once born, never truly ends. It simply changes form, becoming light, sound, memory. Even the stars you see tonight are the afterglow of things long gone. Proof that even what has ended can still shine. So let your thoughts soften. Let your heart loosen its hold on the noise of the day. You've journeyed through time, through hearts and histories, through letters and echoes and dreams. Now you've arrived here at the still center of everything. And here, in the quiet, you can finally rest. Time sleeps, and so may you. Tomorrow will wake, and stories will begin again. Different faces, different centuries, but always the same rhythm. To love, to lose, to hope, to remember. And as long as that rhythm continues, the world will never grow cold. Because love, gentle, endless love, is the fire that keeps history warm.